Welcome back, everybody. Last video we discussed the innate immune system, which prevents you from getting sick, or the non-specific immune system. This one is looking at the adaptive immune system, or this third line of defense that, okay, they got past your main defenses, now you're sick. How are you actually going to get better and prevent the infection from getting you sick a second time? This video will discuss the principles of the adaptive immune response. We'll be able to list the key players of this response, the B cells and the T cells and their functions, and also look at what antibodies actually do for your body and how they prevent you, or how they help you to get better after you actually develop an illness. Looking at the adaptive immune response, or the specific immune response, the principal factor, one of the principal characteristics of this response is that it has to be specific. So while the innate immune response is there to prevent you from getting sick, it's looking at general characteristics. This adaptive immune response is looking at specific characteristics, that specific protein on this one type of flu, or that specific one protein on this one type of tuberculosis bacteria. So it's a highly specific response for the adaptive immune response. We want this adaptive immune response to be diverse. This adaptive immune response, when you're born, you need to be able to recognize every possible pathogen, every possible antigen in your entire lifetime, including ones that have not even been developed in nature yet through evolution. So it's pretty amazing that at birth, you're able to recognize every possible antigen that you might ever see in your entire lifetime. This immune response needs some memory, so your immune system does need to be able to recall previous infections, so it can prevent you from getting sick from that same exact flu or from that same exact cold virus. It needs to be specialized, so your adaptive immune response is going to attack a tuberculosis bacteria differently than it's going to attack a chlamydia bacteria, because they're different organisms, they have different weaknesses. So your adaptive immune response is able to recognize that and develop different battle strategies depending on the actual type of pathogen. While the innate immune response is just every time trying to get that round peg in that square hole, it doesn't matter, it's going to try the same thing. And if it fails, it fails. The adaptive immune response can actually change how it goes about and attacks a specific microorganism. And most important, one of them, obviously all this is important, but the adaptive immune response is self-limiting. So yes, you want your immune system to be active and to kill the infection, but once the infection is gone, you need to be able to stop that immune response. You don't want all of these cells going around killing other cells if the infection is gone, because that can lead to autoimmunity and other immune disorders. So you need a good start, but you also need a good finish, and you need the ability to turn off that adaptive immune response after the threat has passed. And you want your adaptive immune response to be safe to self. So you want it to attack bacteria, but you don't want it to be able to attack your own personal cells. And autoimmunity is where that confusion occurs, where your immune system starts recognizing your own antigens as foreign and starts attacking yourself, which is not a normal response, obviously. So this third line of defense is this adaptive immune response, and this consists of what we call lymphocytes, which are your white blood, or a specific type of your white blood cells. So this is a highly specific response, so response to specific invaders. It can recognize these specific antigens, and it's these white blood cells. Specifically, the two main types that you need to know are your B cells, which produce antibodies, and your T cells. Looking at B cells are the ones that are going to attack invaders that are floating around your blood or your lymphatic system. One helpful way to memorize where B cells mature is that B stands for that, or doesn't actually stand for, but it can help you to remember that B cells mature in the bone marrow. As you may or may not know, all of your blood cells, red, white, platelets, all of your blood cells are created in your bone marrow inside of your bones. And it's these B cells, they actually mature there too. So not only are they created there, they stay in your bone marrow and they grow up, and that's where they actually learn how to fight and how to recognize foreign antigens. There's two different types of B cells. You have these patrolling B cells, which are going to actually create antibodies. So B cells' main job is to create antibodies, that we'll discuss in a second what they actually do. So immediately after they can recognize an invader, they're going to activate and create antibodies against that antigen. And some of those B cells, when they're active, will not actually join the battle, but will actually stay back and those will be called memory B cells. So these memory B cells are ones that are going to not actively participate in that first battle, but they're going to stay back, and now that they're slightly active, if that infection comes around again, they can reactivate much quicker and prevent you from getting sick from the same thing twice. Looking at antibodies, antibodies are these proteins that are made by B cells that tag invaders so macrophages can eat them. So there is a mechanism where antibodies can cause actual cell damage, but most times antibodies don't actually kill anything. Antibodies are just these flags. So we mentioned that macrophages have the ability to recognize specific antigens, but they can't recognize all the antigens compared to a B cell. So the B cell, if it's active to a specific antigen, will start creating antibodies, and these antibodies will stick all over to the specific antigen that was created, and basically it's going to flag and tag it for the macrophage. So the macrophage might have not recognized it at first. All of a sudden there's all of these antibodies covering this protein, covering this cell, this foreign invader, and the macrophage, oh, I'm supposed to eat this, and then goes over and actively consumes it. So these B cells produce antibodies which flag and tag the actual invaders. And the key thing is that these antibodies are highly specific. So an antibody will only attach to one specific antigen. So it's just like kind of like enzymes, where this highly specific interaction that one antibody can only actually attach to one specific antigen. So you can't have an antibody that's just randomly going to kill all these bacteria. It's only going to target one specific part of that one specific bacteria. Looking at the B cell immune response from beginning to end, so we have this invader, this foreign antigen at the top, which has these triangular shaped red antigens all over it. You have B cells. B cells are highly specific. Each B cell can only recognize one and only one antigen. So you need to have a B cell for every specific antigen that you might ever see. If one of those B cells happens to recognize one of the antigens on one of these invaders, they will stick together and they'll activate. This B cell, some of them will become plasma cells, which are these patrolling ones, which are going to then release antibodies to flag and tag that invader and eventually cause that invader to be consumed. While some of these B cells will stay in reserve and become these memory B cells. So you have these B cells that can only recognize one antigen. If that one B cell recognizes a specific antigen on an invader, becomes active, some of those B cells start secreting antibodies to flag and tag that invader, while other ones become these memory B cells, which are in reserves. And you can see this entire process takes between 10 to 17 days. So this is why you get sick. This process is happening before you actually develop symptoms, but you're sick for a few days because it takes this full almost 2 weeks to get enough antibodies to actually clear up that infection. The question is, what if the attacker manages to actually get past the B cells and actually infect directly some of your cells? So it's not talking about a floating virus or floating bacteria anymore. What happens if they actually make it into your physical cell and basically are hiding in there to prevent them from getting destroyed? Thankfully, you have T cells, specifically killer T cells or cytotoxic T cells that are going to help you out. T cells are named T cells because they mature in your thymus. So they're created in the bone marrow, but then they move to the thymus gland, which is this little butterfly-shaped gland that actually rests directly on top of your heart. This is where they grow up and mature and learn how to actually fight. You have two main types of T cells that you need to know. There's many more actually, but the two ones that you specifically need to know are called helper T cells, which do exactly what they sound. They don't actively cause any damage. Their job is to basically sound the alarm system. So they're almost like the generals that when they're given information, they become active. They can send out battle commands of, you do this, you do that, you start making this. So they activate other cells and coordinate that battle plan and that strategy to kill off the infection. The second type of T cell that you need to know are called killer T cells or cytotoxic T cells. These are the ones that are going to actively kill infected body cells. So these are the ones that if a virus manages to infect and take over and hijack one of your human cells, these killer T cells, it can recognize that and can destroy that body cell before that virus hopefully can replicate and spread even farther. And you can just see the thymus gland right there in the middle is right directly above your heart. And this is an example of how the killer T cells actually attack. So you can see that if the other cell that's infected can send out some signals, send out some interferons, this T cell can recognize some of the things that are happening. It can bind to that invaded cell or even that cancer cell. It's then going to release some enzymes called perforin, which are actually going to physically pop and destroy and create holes in the cell membrane of that infected cell, thereby killing it and preventing, hopefully, that virus from sending out more virus particles and infecting other cells. So basically, you destroy an infected body cell to save the rest of the body, hopefully. That's the entire goal of these cytotoxic T cells.